Artifacts are sometimes inevitable, despite your best efforts. Whether they are caused by animal movements, a piece of equipment, or something else, Offline Sorter has tools to help remove these artifacts from waveform data, thereby making these sorting units cleaner and easier. The two tools we're going to go over in this video are Invalidate Cross-Channel Artifacts and Invalidate High Amplitude Artifacts. These tools are for invalidating waveforms and will not modify continuous data. Let's start by looking at a file that has a clear artifact. These data are waveforms that were detected from a filtered wideband signal, but have not yet been saved into a new file, which is why I see the stacked waveform and continuous data streams in the timeline view. This is for illustration purposes only. You should save your files often. It is easy to see the presence of artifact bouts in this file because they vastly exceed the amplitude of the signal. Looking at the data for a channel, it appears there may be an isolated cluster, suggesting a spike unit is present in this channel, but it is almost impossible to parse out because of the high amplitude waveforms contaminating the signal. Removing the artifact not only will make the sorting easier, but it will also reduce the inclusion of artifacts into the final spike unit. Before using the Remove Artifact tools, I need to know the characteristics of the artifact. Exploring across channels, these artifacts occur at the same time, but the amplitude varies somewhat across the channels. To get a sense of the overall amplitude, I will look at the range, shown here on the left beside the Y-scale zoom, and I will use the threshold cursor to approximate the range of the signal data. As long as I do not push detect, changing this threshold slider will not affect the waveforms. The threshold slider option will only be available when continuous data is displayed in the timeline view. Looking across several channels, it appears many of the artifacts are above 500 microvolts, and all of the data are well below this value. If we zoom in on the timescale, we can see these artifacts have a high amplitude peak and then oscillate before returning to baseline. Looking even closer at one of these oscillation periods, we can see that at least 3 waveforms were defined from this artifact. In a different channel, the artifact creates 5 to 6 waveforms. Exploring across channels and occurrences of the artifact, we see a variation across the length, but we know there are roughly 3 to 6 spurious waveforms defined from each occurrence of the artifact. Based on the characteristic of the artifact and these data, and its extremely high amplitude compared to the signal, the first tool I will apply is Invalidate High Amplitude Artifacts. I will select to apply this tool across all channels. The amplitude threshold is the minimum amplitude a signal must cross to qualify it as an artifact. Based on my exploration of these data, 1 microvolt is a conservative value, and 500 microvolts is a more aggressive removal. Once a signal crosses the 500 microvolt threshold, you can define how many milliseconds after will be also classified as an artifact. Any waveform that occurs within that period will be invalidated as an artifact. From looking at these data, the artifact creates 3 to 6 waveforms. Each waveform is 800 microseconds because that is what I defined them to be when I detected. For these data, I did not see any true waveforms occurring closely around the artifacts. To make sure I get the entire artifact, I'm going to say that up to 5 waveforms that immediately follow the artifact are also artifacts, even if they don't cross the amplitude level. That means for the time setting, 4000 microseconds, or 4 milliseconds, which is 5 waveforms of 800 microsecond length. It is possible I may invalidate true waveforms with such a long time setting, but in these data, I'm more concerned with invalidating the whole artifact and am willing to lose a few true waveforms. If your data has activity that is near an artifact, it will be more beneficial to have a conservative time setting. After applying this tool, many waveforms become a darker gray. These are the invalidated waveforms that were classified as artifacts. We can also see the clusters were recalculated and that there is indeed a spike unit on this channel. In the control grid by Invalid Waveforms, you can hide the invalidated waveforms. Now it is very easy to see that there is a unit in the waveforms view, but that we didn't remove all the artifact waveforms. To see which waveforms were removed, and importantly, which were not, I'm going to view the invalidated waveforms. This dark gray color is hard to see. To change the color, go into Tools, Options, Colors. I will change it to orange to make the invalidated waveforms easy to see in this video. The waveforms view now looks like a mess, but in the timeline view, you can easily see which artifacts were invalidated and which were not by our initial pass of the Invalidate High Amplitude Artifacts tool. This one here was missed likely because its amplitude did not meet the criterion we set. To get the remainder of these spurious waveforms, we will now apply the Invalidate Cross-Channel Artifacts tool. As the name suggests, for this tool you must apply it across multiple channels. In these data, we are looking for artifacts that are entire waveforms, which means the artifact can be up to 800 microseconds or 32 ADC ticks. The percent of channels that must have an artifact is how you control the restrictiveness of this tool. Whatever setting you choose will ultimately depend on your data and how prevalent the artifact is across channels. Since I've already removed many of these artifacts, I'll do a moderate setting of 50%. That means out of 32 channels, the waveform must occur at the exact same time in at least 16 of them to be classified as an artifact. As a caution, this tool can be very slow if it finds a lot of artifact waveforms. Now, you can see that the artifacts that were not removed by Invalidate High Amplitude tool were removed with the Cross Channels tool. Once happy with the data, a new file must be exported to save the data without the artifact waveforms. Since my original file is a PL2, I'll export to a new PL2. Uncheck the Export Invalidated Waveforms box to save the file without the artifact waveforms. No one tool will be perfect, and you will have to investigate the properties of the artifacts in your data to determine the best course to remove them. If you do run into questions, the support team at Plexon is happy to look at your data with you in a virtual data session. You can schedule one via the help desk found on our website, or contact us at support@plexon.com. Thank you.